Hey Internet, it's RJ. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning into the show today. Now, today's episode, we're talking about the interesting age-old question of when should you actually pay your credit card bill. So, typical fashion, I will cover, the important dates you need to know. We'll give you the straight-up answer for most people. Then I'll cover a few different scenarios, as well as tell you what I normally do and why. So, of course, if that sounds interesting to you, then go ahead, press the subscribe button, and let's get to work. Now, really quick to get us in here, again, we have a whole 101 playlist I can put down below for you, but the gist of it is a credit card is a revolving line of credit, so you're going to use it for, it's usually either, anywhere from 28 to 31 days as a statement cycle, and then at the end of that time, the issuer is going to compile everything that you've spent, and they're going to send you a bill, and that is what you owe. It's pretty simple to the point, revolving credit, if you had $1,000, right? You spend $100, you have $900 of available credit. You use 10% of that credit. When you pay that $100 back, you go from $900 to $1,000 of available credit, and it's all available to you. So that's the Cliff Notes version of how this works. But a lot of times questions come up of when should you exactly pay your bill. Now, there's a few different dates that we're going to start off with first. So we're going to go through the important dates. I'll give you an example of a statement where to look at, and then we'll get into the answer. So when we talk about dates, there's a few dates here. So the statement date or statement closing date. This is going to be once per month. And again, like we just said, the issuer totals up all those outstanding charges, and they're going to send you the bill. Now, this could come through the mail. Most issuers these days are forcing you to opt into e-statements in case you'll get a notification that you have to log into your account to pull down a PDF of your bill. So that's the main date. Now, the due date here is the date the payment is actually due. It's typically 21 days from the statement closing date. And then the reporting date is another important date, is when the actual issuer is going to report that activity to the credit agency, so TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. So a few important things here on these dates. A lot of times to make the math easy on these videos, I would say, hey, your statement date is going to be from March 1st to March 31st. But it's not usually the case, right? Because, again, no issuer is going to have every single account they have open and closed at the same time. It's going to be all staggered across. So you constantly have money coming in, money coming out. So your statement could really be from, March 27th to April 27th. It's still a 30 or 31 day cycle, but it is important to note it's not necessarily going to be every single time, an actual calendar month. Now, if you prefer it, you can request a new date, and if you just prefer to have all your stuff line up or just to have it at the beginning of the month, you could request a new date. You can go through, usually do it through secured message or just phone in. Just of course, it's going to take about another cycle for that to kick in, so it wouldn't necessarily push out your current charges, farther down the road, but you could do that if you wanted to. Now, due date is another very simple one. It's when your money is actually due, but there is about a 3-week lag between the end of the statement and the due date. And the reason is because there's a built-in what they call grace period. Now, this isn't the issuers being nice to you. Trust me, they didn't really want to add a grace period. But when you think about it, yes, we have a lot of e-statements, but if you go back a ways, the issuer has to, in the olden times, drop that letter in the mail, get it to you. You have to read it, write a check, drop it back in the mail, and get it to them, and that takes time. If you do everything spot on, 3 weeks probably is about round trip for the whole process. So that's really why you have the grace period. That's why you won't be charged interest if you pay any time between, the statement close date and the due date. However, it's important to note they're still keeping track of interest in the background. And if you did not pay by the due date, then all that interest comes due and it'll be added to your bill. You'll also see, your full statement amount and a minimum payment. You have to at least make that minimum payment by the payment date to count as an on-time payment. You should always pay it in full. You know that by now, I'm sure, but if nothing else, you have to make the minimum. Now, the reporting date is harder to nail down because we don't really know by issuer when they report to the credit agencies. We assume it's, at the end of the statement cycle, they'll report, your activity, which would include on-time payments. It will include your credit utilization from the example we gave in the first, in the opening part of the show. And that's how your credit, information is built at the major credit agencies, right? So that the reporting date can come into play if you want to know when your specific issuer reports. You might have luck looking it up or simply asking them. I don't know all the dates off the top of my head. I know some issuers will report multiple times. If you make multiple payments, they will do that. It's definitely not everyone. So that's everything you need to know. So what is the answer? Well, for the vast majority of people, the answer is simple. Pay your bill when the bill comes. It's really not any more complicated than that, especially if you're going to pay in full. You could definitely make the argument, since you're using other people's money, you'd want to have your money available to you as long as possible for other endeavors, other things like that. If you wanted to, go maximum value strategy. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to pay them early, because you're using someone else's money, and it's basically a free loan so long as you get it in before the due date. So that's the answer. So most people won't need to think about it much past that. Now, there are some other scenarios though, and this is where utilization comes back into play for our first scenario. So let's just say you bought something, a really big purchase, maybe you only had a $1,000 credit limit, you bought a $900 thing. Well, again, when that gets reported, the closing date, your utilization would be 90%. General target range is you don't want to go past 30%. That's what the experts say anyways. But you wouldn't, if you let 90% utilization report, it's going to pull down your score without question. Now, it's not the end of the world because you pay it back. Your score will return to normal. Credit companies, credit agencies know that utilization is a part of this game. It's just going to look like, man, you're really, really leveraged. So if you were to do that, pay or buy or something really big, you could potentially benefit from just paying it off early so it doesn't report a 90% utilization, or just paying it down if you wanted to, and paying the remainder at the end of the statement date. That could make sense. Another thing could make sense is if unfortunately, you're going to carry a balance, well, then paying earlier than later does help because of how interest works. Again, they're going to send you the bill, but just because interest isn't due right this minute doesn't mean they're not counting in the background. So you can tell if you pay earlier, pay what you can early, again, at least the minimum payment, that's, going to cut down on the amount of interest you owe. So we're going to borrow this example from NerdWallet because they did the math for us. But if you take a look at this one, you can see here, if you paid $400 on the last day of the month, your balance will have been $1,000 for 29 days and $600 for 1 day. Your average daily balance will be about $987. If your credit card is a 15% interest rate, your interest charge for the month would be about $12. Conversely, if you paid that same $400 halfway through the month, your balance will have been $1,000 for 15 days and $600 for 15 days. In that case, your average daily balance would be $800 and your interest charge would be $10. So you do cut a little bit down. So, if you can't pay it in full, paying earlier makes more sense because it's going to be less days in interest, because just because we can't see the interest doesn't mean they're not counting and adding this up. But again, still the simplest way to pay in full, pay when the bill comes. Now, what I've started doing for different reasons than this is paying when the bill comes, but previously I would simply just pay off the card when I was done with it, because I have so many cards, so I may just use this card for one purchase, and I'm not going to use it again for the month. Previously, I would go in and just pay it off, right? Just to not worry about it. But what we've seen, and this is opinion based on crowdsourced data, this is not fact, is that, card issuers, and part of their approval process for new cards, they only want to issue cards to profitable accounts. And profitable accounts are accounts for them that use their credit. So when I got denied for the City Premier with many others a few months back or last summer, they said too much available unused credit. Which means, in their eyes, they're like, hey, well, you have plenty of credit. You don't use it. Why are you asking us for more? Oh, well, we're not going to make any money off of you. We don't want to give you the sign-up bonus. So what I've started doing is letting the cards report and then paying it off when the bill comes. So at least to the issuer, it's like, okay, you're at least using your accounts. I may be more inclined to give you another account. I've also started, when I have multiples of the same cards, I have 4 Freedom cards. Instead of using up that $1,500 cap on the rotating categories, I'll start using maybe 500, 500, 500, let those all report so they all stay active, again, showing that I'm using them so I look like a slightly more profitable customer. Now, again, that's more of an outlier point. The rest of this stuff was kind of more just to answer the question, when should you pay? Just pay when the bill comes. Pretty simple, and you should be fine. Pay in full. If you're going to have to carry a balance, the earlier you can pay, the better, because it's going to reduce the amount of interest that you owe. Now, I will say some issuers, even if you pay early in the statement, they may still hit you with a minimum payment at the statement close date, because that was an earlier payment. Now your statement's closed, so you still may have a minimum payment to make. but it shouldn't be much since you paid a lot up front. So final part here, tips, what can you do? Well, I think it's pretty easy. If nothing else, you should set up payment notifications or statement notifications. Now, it's easy when you just have like one credit card, but when you have US Bank, Chase, Bank of America, Citi, Huntington, you're never going to keep them all straight. So whenever I get a new card, I make sure to go in there, mess around with this notification settings so that I get an email or text every time the statement date closes. And a lot of them, they let you change the date range. So I just put it out, tell me as early as possible. And whenever that comes, I simply go and make the payment. That's easy enough. Now you can also set up auto pay. You should definitely set up auto pay for at least the minimum payment. So if you do it for the minimum payment, you'll technically never miss a payment. Which, carrying interest isn't as bad as, missing a payment. You could do auto pay in full if you know your expenses and know where the money's coming from. I don't do pay in full because I have a lot of different bank accounts, and sometimes I gotta make sure the money's coming from the right one. But you could do that as well. But between those notifications and auto pay, you should be fine. And again, just pay when the statement comes and you should be good to go. Again, we covered the other potential scenarios and we covered why I do it as well. So overall, paying your credit card isn't really that scary of a thing. This is a question that does come up a lot, so I did want to address it. So anyway, guys, if you like this one, drop me a thumbs up down below. If you found it particularly interesting, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, posting content just like this every week, right back here every Sunday with all the news you can use in the week that wasn't credit and finance. Again, sound off down below. Let me know what some of your strategies are. When do you pay? How do you pay? What do you think the preferential strategy is? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this one. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you very soon in the next one.